Welcome back, everyone, to the Monday Morning Solution podcast. And first of all, let me apologize. I know I'm recording this episodes almost 3 weeks after my race day, and the most important news is that I'm no longer sick. So, what happened was as soon as I came out from my race, which was on 10th of November, which is what this episode is going to be all about, me discussing the experience that I had from my first half marathon. So, as soon as I came out of my race on the 10th of November, a magnitude of things happened. First of all, my stomach was all upside down. I literally was just taking visits to the bathroom almost like multiple times in a day for 2 to 3 days straight. And then after that, I actually felt sick. I had fever coming Friday, and then it almost lasted for the next 3 days, and then I had cough and whatnot. So basically, I just spent 2 weeks being sick, and I did manage to release the race day vlog video on my YouTube channel, but I couldn't record this podcast since I was barely able to talk because of the cough and the fever. So here we are now, fully back to health, and let's begin with the episode entailing my experience from my first half marathon race. So, 10th of November was race day. I remember that I woke up pretty much early that day, and as soon as I woke up, I chugged in 1000 milligrams of sodium from BPN, and I wanted to make sure that I had no cramps during the race, because growing up, I was always the kid who got so annoying cramps. So I used to get cramps in my calves, my abdomen. I used to get cramps in my biceps, my fingers, and literally sometimes I even got cramps in my neck, which was super weird. But I used to be the kid who cramped a lot. So I made sure that my sodium intake was on point, my electrolyte intake was on point, and fortunately I had the pleasure of actually emptying my bowels that morning. So I did that, and then I took a water bottle with me, called myself a cab, and then I headed for the race venue somewhere around 6:45 a.m. The race was going to begin at around 8 a.m. So I wanted to make sure that I actually reached there on time so that I could collect my bib and at the same time the t-shirt, and then just get a view of how the race course was gonna look like. And I also met my friend there, Mike, at the race course because he was also running the Tom Walker half marathon. And we just like warmed up a little bit, and before going into the race course, we did a one-ish mile warm up, and we went into the trails, which was pretty solid. The day was not as cold as we thought. So usually the best climate or the best weather to run a half marathon or run basically is around 58 to 60 degrees Celsius. Fahrenheit, my bad. It is somewhere around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. But that day, like the temperature even before the race started was somewhere around 70 degree Fahrenheit with 91% humidity. So this was already a curveball for us. And honestly, they actually sent us an email. So the marathon committee sent us an email saying that this might not be the half marathon or the 5k for you to set a PR. So make sure that you hydrate yourself properly and take good care of yourself, because we don't want anyone fainting on the race course. And I totally get it, because it was way warmer than we had imagined. So I I got to the venue, we warmed up a little bit, and then I was about to start the run. Fun fact, while I was actually going to the venue, my Uber driver, she was actually such a sweet person. So she just asked me where I was going, and I told her that I was going for my first half marathon. And surprisingly, she was also a runner. So she started giving me tips on how to actually run well, and like literally everything that might come around running in general. And she was just telling me, do these, do that, and just don't do this, don't do that. And she was such a sweet person, so I really appreciate her advice. And I really actually took one of her advices that she gave me, which I will tell you towards the end of the episode, which actually did help me a lot. So we were at the start line, and I remember the whistle going off and everyone starting to run. While we were actually running, the first mile was full of adrenaline. Like, we had swarms of people running together, and I could see the 210 pacer, the 2-hour pacer, and the 152 pacer. And honestly, my goal was to stick with the 2-hour pacer, and then as soon as we reached the finish line, like a mile to the finish line, I wanted to like run as fast as possible so that I could get my sub 2-hour goal. But as soon as I started running, there were just so many people there that I eventually lost sight of the 2-hour pacer. But I was still running, I was feeling great, and little did I know that 2 miles, or about 2 to 3 miles into the race, my stomach actually turned on me. And I don't know who's actually if listening to this part, but this is literally the most funny and at the same time the most embarrassing moment of my entire life. So, about 3 miles into the race, I had the worst experience from and the worst pains coming from my stomach. And I literally felt that my entire gut was moving upside down inside of me while I was trying to run. And this also costed me a lot of time because I was barely able to hold 11 minute per mile pace because of my stomach, where I should have held at least 9.5 or 9:15 minute per mile pace to get my goal time. But I couldn't do that. So I struggled kind of for the next 2 miles. And then after those 2 miles, I finally had to make a call that whether I would want to go into the woods and empty my stomach, or if I wanted to like complete the rest of the race with the same condition. And it was a difficult decision for me to make, to be honest, like jokes apart, but this was also like a very difficult decision because I went into the race with a goal of getting the sub 2-hour mark for my half marathon. So finally, I come to a conclusion, I make the call, I go into the woods, I empty my stomach, and then I get back into the race. And as soon as I get back, I'm feeling on top of the world because it literally I felt so empty, but in a good way. So I start running. I literally held 9:30 minute per mile paces for about 3 miles, and then I actually started negative splitting. So I went into 8:50 minute per mile paces, 8:55 minute per mile paces, and then towards the end of the race, I actually started kind of losing myself. So I remember that when I was about 6 miles into the race, I was running really well. But about that time, it was like an hour into the race, and the heat had just like skyrocketed. Like, I was sweating a lot. And when I mean a lot, I mean actually a lot. And the humidity was really high. And I had never felt the this level of discomfort in my entire life because I it wasn't a physical pain, it was just exhaustion. Like, it was lack of electrolytes, which shouldn't have been the case because I actually consumed so many of them. But since it was so hot and humid and we were sweating so much, we were just losing a lot of water. So there were aid stations, there were definitely aid stations on the way, but they did not like do a lot because every single time I tried to chug some Gatorade or tried to chug some water, I felt uncomfortable in my stomach, and this was a cue for me to not go forward with that strategy. So I decided to keep it at a minimum and use the water to cool my head rather than put it in my stomach. So I started at around at around 7 mile marker. I started actually struggling, and a lot of people told me about the wall. So basically there is this concept where about in a half marathon, around 8 to 9 miles into the race, you hit this mental zone where your mind is kind of telling you to give up, and it is really really hard on you at that point because you're 9 miles into the race, you have literally exhausted yourself completely. You still have about 5 to 6 miles to end the race, but your body just wants to give up. And this is the point where you actually need to tell your mind to push yourself and keep pushing yourself until you reach the finish line. So about mile number 7, I felt really uncomfortable. About, I would say, mile 7 to 8. It's been a long time. I'm really not that sure about it. So about mile 7 to 8, I started feeling uncomfortable with my plantar fascia hurting, which is like the sole of the foot. And this time it was my right foot, because I had previously experienced injuries on my left foot. But surprisingly, this was actually my right foot that was hurting this time. So I just had to like um, eat it up and just keep running, because I did not want to stop. And here comes the advice of my very polite and helpful Lyft driver. She said that in towards the end of the race, these were her exact words. She said, towards the end of the race, you will want to stop, but no matter what, don't stop. And when she meant don't stop, she meant don't be stationary. She said, when you want to stop, start power walking. She said, do not stand at one place, because as soon as you stand, it is going to be 10 times more difficult for you to start moving your feet up. And I realized that at the mile number 8 marker. And I realized that if I actually stopped running, I might not be able to run again, or I might not be able to hold the pace that I was holding again. So I did power walk for a couple of minutes, and it was more like I was holding about 11 minute per mile paces. And at that moment something struck me. So for my entire race, I was actually listening to a podcast between Chris Williamson and Alex Hormozy. So the 3 episode series that they have on the Modern Wisdom podcast is actually like one of my favorite, literally my favorite 3 episodes of podcast that I've ever listened to. And I was listening to one of those episodes for until like mile number 8. And at the mile number 8, I was like, okay, the podcast is not doing anything good to me at this point. So I legit switched from the podcast, opened up Apple Music, and started banging music. And at that point, I just reminded myself why I registered in the race and what my original goal was for the race. So I remind myself of my true goals, of my purpose of starting the race, and I start running. Like, I start running from holding a 11 minute per mile pace to getting back to running 9 minute per mile paces. And that was the hardest part. But as soon as I reached that 9 minute pace mark, I told myself that now I just need to hold this pace. I don't need to go any faster. I don't need to get slower. I just need to hold this pace. And something that I actually did forget to mention in the episode was that the entire race was actually a trail race. So the course that the half marathon was actually conducted on was the Hawthorne Trail, and it was a 680 feet of elevation gain, which is a lot kind of for me, because it was my first half marathon and it was definitely not a flat route. So about mile number 9, mile number 10, we started facing those slopes and hills again, which we had faced towards the in the first half of the race, which was around 3 to 4 miles into the race. We were actually done with those hills and slopes. And then the mile number 5 to mile number 9 was kind of a steady pace route, which is like a flat route. And from mile number 9 to mile number 13, it was again the hills and the slopes, because we it was a out and back course, so we went all out and then we got back. And when we came back to the hills, that was the most brutal part, because now not only did I had to cross them, I had to hold the 9 minute mile pace to cross the hills. And right before we started with the hills, I actually came across the 210 pacer. So the 2 hour 10 minute pacer, she was a girl, and I just went right next to her and I asked her, "Hey, I know we just have like about 4 miles, 5 miles left into the race. Do you think that if I can catch up to the 2 hour pacer and just finish the race under 2 hours?" And she said, I remember her saying that I'm going to be brutally honest with you. It is going to be difficult, but if you really want to do it, I'm sure you can do it. And I just heard that and I was like, I have to do this. So I just overtook her, started running, and I remember actually on my way back in the second half of the race, I overtook so many people because the first half of the race I barely ran because of my stomach, and then the second half of the race when I was like doing negative splits, I was overtaking so many people. And you don't actually realize, but when you're towards the end of the race, you have like 3 or 4 miles left. Now the time actually flies by so quickly because you are racing against the time. Like you want to cover a certain distance before a certain amount of time is over. So those last 3 to 4 miles actually pass by so fast. And it's the same thing happened with me. I was about 9 to 10 miles into the race, and I used to look at my watch half a mile in. I used to look at my watch again, and half a mile done again, half a mile done again. And under no time I was literally at the 12-mile marker. And it was the last mile. So what I did was actually I tried calling my parents on like I tried video calling my parents because I wanted to have them the experience of like crossing the last mile together, but unfortunately they were like occupied somewhere else. They were on a trip, so they couldn't take my call. Actually they took my call but they couldn't talk, so I just like called them after my race. So it was the last mile of the race, and about half a mile into the last mile, I could see the finish line, and there were so many people who were standing right besides the finish line, and they were like cheering for me and basically cheering for all the people who were crossing the finish line. And dashed towards the finish line, and I was super proud of myself. I look at my watch and it said like 2 hours and 4 minutes, and I already knew that I couldn't basically complete my goal. But it was all right. Honestly, I definitely feel that I could have completed my goal if it wasn't for my stomach issue. And but bygones are bygones now. So I look at my watch, it's 2:04, and I just start running towards the finish line, and uh, I crossed the finish line at around 2:06:03, which was the time on the clock, but my bib time was 2 hours 5 minutes and 59 seconds, something like that. So it was close by. So I completed the half marathon in about 2 hours and 6 minutes. The initial goal was to complete the half marathon in under 2 hours, and I overdid it by 6 minutes. So, if you guys know me personally, you know I'm not the kind of a guy who gives up on his goals. So, as soon as I came out of the race, I met my friend. Her name is Adriana, and she ran the half marathon in 1 hour 52 minutes, which is absolutely bonkers to me. But she has run multiple half marathons and half marathons, full marathons, half Ironmans, and full Ironmans. So, uh, kudos to her. She's a beast. But she told me that there was another half marathon on January 19th, and this time it was in the same location, but it was a more flat route and it would be colder. So this time the odds were in my favor. So as soon as I got out of the race, first I could barely walk. I'm not gonna lie, I could barely walk. My feet were not cramping, but they were literally obliterated. Like they did not work well. So I had to go. I first took some water, took some Gatorade, took some RX bars, and I just sat under a tree and I literally devoured all of it. Like I ate 3 RX bars. I had literally like 2 or 4 cups of Gatorade, something like that. And along with that, I had some bananas. And then I just like hovered around for a bit, and In that time, I saw a lot of people coming out of the race zone and crossing the race line, and I just felt like once the physical pain had passed away, like when you are in physical pain after the half marathon or the marathon, your mind kind of like is in a limbo. It doesn't actually like function like it should function on normal day. So as soon as I came out of the half marathon and my legs did not hurt and my mind started working back again, I just realized that I had literally completed uh, significant uh, a very significant milestone in my life. Like, I never ever thought that I would be a runner or I would even run. And honestly, when I started running in May, running a mile for me was difficult. And from running 1 mile to like running an entire half marathon, I feel like the time just flew by. Like 5, 6 months just flew by, and all of a sudden, I just ran my first half marathon. And even though I did not get my desired time, I had to convince myself to be more grateful for what I had achieved and take that positivity and channel it into motivation for my next race. Instead of like bludgeoning myself with the fact that I couldn't complete the race in my desired time, I chose to actually appreciate myself, which was actually the first time, believe me or not, this was the first time I actually chose not to reprimand myself and to just accept what was and take that motivation and channel it towards something better, towards something bigger. So after the race, I immediately booked a cab. I came home, took a shower, I got some food, and then a few days later, uh, my legs were really sore. And as I mentioned it at the beginning of the podcast, uh, I I actually had a stomach like I had a lot of stomach issues for like the next 2 days. Like I couldn't hold food inside of me. Anytime I ate something, it just like I had to rush to the bathroom. And then a few days after that, I actually felt sick. I had fever, cough, sore throat, you name it, I had it. So that was almost 2 weeks of my life. But as soon as I felt good, I actually registered for my next half marathon, which is on January 19th. It's called the Mary Andrews Half and Full Marathon. It is on the same location, but this time the route is a more flat route and it is towards the end of the route that we ran the half marathon on. And it is going to be much colder, so this time the odds are in our favor, and this time I'm going to make sure that I fuel myself properly for the race. So, in retrospection, if I think about it, what exactly did go wrong? Like, why did my stomach get upset? Because I didn't eat anything that I was not supposed to eat, and I actually thought that my carb loading went really well because come race day, I was actually feeling very well. But when I talked to Adriana about this, she actually asked me what I had before the race day. Like she told me to give her the breakdown of the things that I had before the race day. And I remember telling her that I had oats for dinner. And she was like, "You did everything right, you just shouldn't have had the oats." And I was like, why? But my body is so familiar with oats. I've been having oats for the last 4 years now, and I digest them pretty well. So how could it be oats that actually ruined my performance? And she was like, "You forgot they have a lot of fiber." And that's when it struck me. I literally started laughing. I was like, "Oh my god, I literally forgot that oats are literally it says on the packet a good source of fiber." And I was like, it takes a long time to digest fiber, so even though it has a lot of carbs, it is also a lot of fiber, and I shouldn't have eaten that, and I should have relied more on monosaccharides and simple form of carbohydrates like bananas, pasta, or like Gatorade maybe, or something like that, which was very quick to absorb in my bloodstream and in my like replenish my liver and muscle glycogens. So and she literally offered me a help for my next half marathon. She was like, Next time, before your half marathon, give me a call and I'll tell you what to eat. And I was like, okay, captain. Because even though even though like this made me realize that even though I'm a certified personal trainer, like some experiences actually only come through doing the things in real life. Like you can't study about things and learn those things. You have to do them in the real life to actually get the experiences that matter. So that was a done deal. We are now officially about 8 weeks, 7 to 8 weeks out from my second half marathon, which is the Mary Andrews half marathon, which is on the 19th of January. And also, on top of that, we are also currently in a powerlifting prep. So currently we are 155 days out from my powerlifting prep final. So I'm not competing in a powerlifting meet, definitely, but on the 1st of May 2025, I have given myself the goal of deadlifting 405 pounds, squatting 315 pounds, and benching 225 pounds at 146-pound body weight. And that is something that I have been thinking for a really long time now, because I have trained my whole life in a very hypertrophic manner. Like I trained for hypertrophy for like almost 6 years and inconsistently, obviously. And then now I convinced myself and proved to myself that I can run for long distances. And now I actually need to convince myself that I can also lift heavy weight. So I contacted one of my friends from India. He's actually like 4 years or 5 years younger to me, and he has been powerlifting for the last 2 or 3 years, and he's really good at it. And I offered him a good amount of money. Definitely, he deserves it. And I literally asked him to coach me because I feel that when you enter these kinds of preps or when you enter zones of your life which are extremely challenging, which are extremely painful at times, I feel you need someone to hold you accountable for your goals, and you need someone who can show you the right direction. And that is why having a coach is so important. It's not always about the tricks and the tips and the hacks the coach gives you to improve your performance. Sometimes it's about holding the accountability and giving you the motivation when you are at your lowest. So we have hired a coach for our next powerlifting, not a meet. Why do I always say a meet? So we have hired a coach for my next powerlifting prep, which we are already on. We are 1 week into that, and we are 1 week into the next half marathon prep. So these two goals are currently in progress, and we shall see the results of these goals in the upcoming months. Again, I would like to apologize for not posting this video earlier. I was really sick, and I hope you guys understand, because I was not able to speak. And if I cannot speak, I can definitely not record a podcast. And that was it. I mean, I wanted to encapsulate my entire experience of the half marathon race day into a single video and then explain the whole thing in depth. So, thank you so much for watching. This is not a long episode, so I hope you guys actually listened to the whole thing towards the very end. And I'll see you guys in the next podcast episode. I'll see you guys next week with another topic and something interesting to learn about and for me to share to you guys.